Hello students, welcome to ShirtBack Academy. In our coding lesson today, we're going to be continuing Module 2, Loops. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about for loops. Our lesson is going to be for loops with B. From the code.org homepage, click on Learn in the top left corner. We're going to go down to where it says Grades K to 5, click Learn More. On the next page, we're going to scroll down. Our lesson today is going to be in Course F. We're going to click there. And our lesson today is going to be exercise 12, for loops with B. Once we're there, we're going to click on the number 1, and we're going to begin coding. Here in our first puzzle, it's asking us to collect the nectar from each flower using the fewest blocks possible. We're going to click on OK and begin. For our first puzzle, let's get a hint. It says drag a purple number block into the space on the repeat loop to tell it how many times to repeat. Here we have something new. In our toolbox, instead of having all of the commands listed, we have them separated by category: actions, math, loops, variables, and comments. Actions will be in our lesson today. It has our move forwards. Our math has operators. Loops, we use counters and repeats. We're going to be using these counter loops in a lot of our puzzles. We have variables, which allow us to set counters, and then we have comments. Let's go over to our play space and trace the path for our bee to get to the nectar. I counted 5 flowers. To start our program, we're going to bring over a repeat and connect it to the when run. For our repeat, we're going to click on Actions, and we're going to bring over a move forward and connect it into the repeat. We're also going to bring over a get nectar. Now we're going to click on our math. This will allow us to bring over a command box and place it inside of our repeat. Here we can type in the number of times we want to repeat. We're going to choose 5, 1 for each flower. When we click Run, our bee gets his nectar. Good job. Here in Puzzle 2, we need to write the code for the bee to collect all the nectar. As we count our nectar, we see that each one goes up by 1. We have 5 flowers, and each one has a nectar from 1 to 5. First thing we're going to do is bring over a move forward and a get nectar. When we hit run, we can see we can get the first flower. To get the rest, we're going to have to make a loop. What we're going to do is we're going to bring over here a move forward, and we're going to create a repeat loop. We're going to set it equal to 2. And inside we're going to bring a get nectar. When we hit reset and run, we can see that our bee got to the second flower. Our code is working pretty good. We have 3 more flowers to get. Let's bring over another repeat and place it after a move forward. Inside of this loop, we're going to set a repeat equal to 3. You should start to see a pattern. We're going to keep building our code, creating another loop. What should we set this repeat loop to? If you see the pattern, you should set it to 4. We're going to keep going with our puzzle and our program. We're going to bring over one more loop, one more repeat loop. In this one, we're going to set it equal to 5 and bring over one more get nectar. So we have a long code here. Let's take a look at it one more time. As we go through our program, you can see that each loop increases by 1 every time. Let's hit run and see what happens. We can see each loop is working well. Great job. That was a long puzzle. We're going to move on to puzzle 3 and learn about for loops, which will help us to cut down on the size of our programs.
Computer know when it's repeated enough times. The repeat block is actually hiding a more sophisticated piece of code called a for loop, which counts from a starting value up to an ending value by a specific increment. So, for example, a repeat 3 block counts from 1 to 3 by 1, and every time it counts, it runs the code inside the loop. The for loop knows how many times it has run by using a counter variable that is set to the starting value at the beginning of the loop and has the increment added to it each time the loop is run. As soon as the counter variable is greater than the ending value, the loop stops running. So the benefit of using a real for loop instead of the repeat block is that you can actually see the counter variable and use it in your loop. So for example, if I have a series of flowers and the first one has 1 nectar, the second one has 2 nectars, and the third one has 3, I can use the for loop to tell the bee to collect counter nectars each time, which would collect 1 at the first flower, 2 at the second, and 3 at the third. Also, in a for loop, you can increment the counter by a number other than 1 each time. You can potentially count by 2s, 4s, or even an amount that changes every time through.
Let's click Continue and move on to puzzle 4. Here we have a multiple choice. Over in the play space, we have the same layout as our previous puzzle. We have 5 flowers, all with nectar. And our multiple choice is asking us to read the code below. What do we think will happen when we click Run? Down in the workspace, you'll see that we have a for loop like we had in the video. In the for loop, we have what's called a counter. The counter will keep track of how many times we go through the loop. In the counter, we have 2 numbers, a beginning and an end, and a count, which is the number that it increases the counter by. We see that in our code, the counter goes from 1 to 4 and increases by 1 every time. The code is asking us to move forward and then repeat however many counters we are in the program. We can see that the bee at each flower must increase the nectar by 1. Let's take a look at our answer choices and see what we think will happen. In our answer choices, choice A says the bee will move forward and collect all the nectar from every flower. B, the bee will get all the nectar from every flower except 1. Or C, the bee will move forward and collect 1 nectar from each flower. I'm going to choose answer B. The reason I'm choosing answer B is that in the counter goes from 1 to 4. When we hit Run, we can see that we were correct. Well done. Let's click Continue and move on to Puzzle 5. Here in Puzzle 5, the instructions are asking us to help the bee collect all the nectar. Over in the play space, let's trace the path. We can see there are 7 flowers, and each flower increases its nectar by 1, from 1 all the way to 7. We're going to begin our code by bringing out a for loop. Within the for loop, we're going to change the counter values from 1 to 10 to 1 to 7. We're doing this because we have 7 flowers in the play space. We're going to increase it by 1 each time. Inside of our for loop, we're going to bring over a move forward and a repeat loop. Inside of our repeat loop, we're going to bring over what's called a variable. The variable here is counter. Counter will keep track of how many times we're going through the for loop. And inside of there, we're going to put a get nectar. Now we've created a full for loop. We have it set for a counter to go from 1 to 7, increasing by 1 each time. At each flower, the bee should get nectar however many times the counter is on. We're going to click Run. And we see that our code is working. The counter loop keeps track of how many nectar the bee needs. Great job. We're going to click Continue and move on to Puzzle 6. Here in Puzzle 6, our instructions are asking us to create a for loop to count down. We need to gather the nectar by counting down from 5 to 1 by ones. Let's click OK and see if we can figure it out. The first thing we're going to do is bring over a for loop with a counter. Inside of our counter loop, we're going to change the values from 5 to 1. This is what our instructions are asking us to do. As we trace our play space path, we see that the flowers go from 5 to 1. Inside of our for loop, we're going to put a move forward and a repeat. Within the repeat, we're going to include, again, our counter variable. We're going to bring over a get nectar inside of the repeat loop. Let's take a look at our code. We have a for loop that counts from 5 to 1, counting by 1, decreasing. Inside we move forward and we repeat our get nectar however many times we are on the counter. We'll click run. We can see each time we go through the counter, it gets reduced by 1. Great job. We're seeing the flexibility of for loops. Let's click on continue and move on to puzzle 7. Here, our instructions are telling us that in our for loops, the last number is called an increment. This is how much we either increase or decrease our counter. Here we're going to start our program by bringing over a for counter loop. We're going to go over to the play space, and we can see that we have 4 flowers. Each flower increases by 2, 1, 3, 5, 7. We're going to change our counter from 1 to 7, and we're going to change the last number, the increment, from 1 to 2. Now our counter will go from 1 to 7, counting by 2s. Inside of the for loop, we're going to bring over a move forward and a repeat. Within the repeat, we're going to bring over the counter variable. Inside of our repeat loop, we're going to put a get nectar command. Let's take a moment to review our code. Our counter goes from 1 to 7, and we have our repeat loop inside. We have set our increment to 2. Now let's go over and click run and see how our code works. Great job! We can see by changing the increment from 1 to 2, we could match the nectar in the flowers. Let's move on to puzzle 8. Here in puzzle 8, it's asking us what should our increment be to collect 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 nectar. Let's get a hint. Our hint says if our loop counts up, the increment is added to the counter variable each time through. What number do we need to add so that we get the correct numbers? The first thing we're going to do is bring over a move forward, a turn right, and another move forward. This will get us to the first flower. There we're going to bring over a for loop. Inside of our counter, we're going to start with the number 3 because that's the first flower nectar number. And we're going to set it equal to 15. In our count by, we're going to change the increment from 1 to 3. If we look at our code, we notice that each flower nectar increases by 3 each time. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Oh, that's right, we forgot our repeat loop. Without the repeat loop, we can't get the nectar. We're going to bring over a counter variable and our get nectar command. Now let's double check our code. Now when we hit run, our code is working great. Well done. Let's click continue and move on to puzzle 9. Here in puzzle 9, it's asking us to use the counter variable twice to solve this puzzle. Let's get a hint. Our hint says that this time, our move forward block and get nectar blocks will be in separate repeat loops, but we'll keep them inside the same for loop. The first thing we're going to do is bring over a for loop and we're going to change the values from 1 to 3. That's because we have three flowers and each one's nectar increases by 1 each time. But you should notice that the move forwards will be different. Inside our for loop, we're going to bring over a repeat loop, and we're going to do that twice. Our instructions tell us that we're going to have to use 2 separate repeat loops. In our first one, we're going to bring over a counter. This will allow us to set our move forwards. So for this puzzle, we can use the same variable in both of the repeat loops. In the second one, we're going to bring over a getNectar command. Now let's review our code. We have our for loop counting from 1 to 3, increasing by 1 each time. We have 2 repeat loops, one that moves forward and one that gets nectar. We're going to click Run. And when we do, we see that our for loop works great. Got 3 more puzzles. Let's finish strong. Here in puzzle 10, it's asking us to combine the counter variable with a math block. We're going to use the counter variable to navigate the garden in the fewest blocks. When we get our hint, it tells us that we need to do some math. We will need to turn the bee at the beginning of each loop to solve the puzzle. We can see that each flower increases by 3 each time. We also see that the space between each flower also increases by 1 each time. The first thing we're going to do is we have to turn our bee so that he can get to the first flower. So first we're going to do, we're going to bring over our for loop. We're going to change the counter from 3 to 15. And the increment is going to change from 1 to 3. This is because as we trace the path of the flowers, each one increases by 3. Inside of our counter variable, our counter loop, we're going to start with a turn left. We need to get our bee turned to face the flower. Inside, we're going to bring over a repeat. Inside of our repeat, we're going to bring over a move forward. We're going to bring over a second repeat and bring over a getNectar. We're going to use 2 repeats, one for each command, one for move forward and one for getting nectar. Now we're going to use our first math operator. We're going to connect this into our first repeat. We're going to bring over our counter, and we know that we have to divide by 3 each time. When our counter is on 3, we need to move 1 block, 3 divided by 3, and so on. In our repeat loop for our nectar, we're going to bring over a second variable for counter so that it can keep track of the nectar for the bee. We have our for loop set from 3 to 15 with an increment of 3. Now when we click Run, we can see both of our counter variables are working. Great job. We're going to click on Continue, move on to puzzle 11. 2 more puzzles left. All right, a challenge puzzle. Challenge puzzles stretch our brain. Let's see how we do. Here in our challenge puzzle, our bee needs to get down the path to each flower. Each flower has a nectar going from 14 to 10, 6, and 2. We also notice that the path in between each flower, the number of squares decrease by 2. Let's see if we can figure out how to solve this problem. First, we're going to bring over a for loop. We're going to set our counter from 14 to 2. We're going to use a decreasing counter because as we go through the play space, each flower's nectar decreases by 4. So we're going to change our increment from 1 to 4. That way, at each flower, the nectar count lessens by 4. From here, inside of our for loop, we're going to bring a turn right so that our bee can face down the path. Inside, we're going to bring over 2 repeat loops. Our first loop, we're going to use our math operator again. We're going to use the counter, and we're going to set that, and this time we're going to divide it by 2. The reason we're doing that is because each time we go through each flower, the counter will go in half. We're going to connect our move forward and our second repeat. In our second repeat, we're going to bring down the counter. This is going to be for the nectar. So now we've completed our for loop. Let's click run. You can see our bee is getting the nectar. And our move forward works as well. Great job. That's a really tricky puzzle. If you were able to figure that out the first time, you're doing an awesome job. Let's click continue and go to our last puzzle. Here in our last puzzle, we have one more nectar path. Our instructions are telling us that what should our increment be to go from 15, 12, 9, 6, and 3. Let's trace our path. I see 2 patterns, do you? First, we're going to take care of our for loop. We're going to change our counter from 15 to 3. And we're going to change our increment from 1 to 3. That's because each nectar's flower decreases by a number of 3 each time the bee gets there. Inside of our for loop, we're going to bring over a turn left, move forward, turn right, and move forward. This will allow our bee to get to the first flower. We're going to continue by bringing over a repeat loop, and inside there we're going to bring over a counter. The command inside will be a get nectar. Now let's double check our code. We're going to click run. You see our counter is working great, decreasing by 3 each time. And our bee gets all the nectar. Great job, everyone. Congratulations. We have now completed this lesson, 4 loops with bee. This was a tricky lesson and a lot of new material. If you have any questions, please review the levels that you have problems with at the appropriate time point in the lesson. We thank you for following along to this lesson, everybody, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Keep on coding.